Hey, what's going on, guys? Pete here with MixBetterNow.com and LearningToMix.com, and today we're going to be checking out my updated two-bus as of March the 6th, 2018. Two-bus, MixBuss, Masterbus, Stereo Bus, whatever you want to call it. I do one of these every year just to keep you guys in the loop as to if I, change anything, add anything new, keep anything the same, have any different sort of techniques. And I kind of have one big thing that I sort of want to share with you and just sort of explain, because I think it's something that you guys can all take on board as well and apply to your own sessions. So let's go ahead and jump on here and have a look.
What's up? This is Steven Slate, and you are watching Mix Better Now.
All right, so I picked an unmixed session, if you will. We're just going to take a look at all the tracks here. You're going to see that I pretty much have nothing on here. Here is my submix and my mix bus. Now, sometimes this is a little confusing, but sometimes I call my submix my mix bus, and then sometimes I call my mix bus my monitor bus. But the concept here is that there's two of them. All the processing is done on the submix, and then we sort of have a clean path out in terms of the mix bus, which is actually a master fader. The submix is an auxiliary send or a bus. But if we take a look at the session, everything on the right here, these are all my effects that I sort of have ready to go, but everything to the left of these two buses here, these are all the tracks, so you can see pretty much the only thing is I have the VMR up here on all this stuff. Now, like I said, these are not mixed. The only thing that I have in the VMR is the Virtual Console Collection and the Trim Tool. Any mix, pretty much for the most part, that is recorded in the box and not through a console, I will typically put this on. So it's just something that I do. Let's take a listen to where the band comes in. We'll take a look over here at the two bus, and then you can just take a listen. Everything's pretty raw. We'll go from the second verse.
Oh, familiar feel, my long companion through the fall. Winter's end is here, and I've been remembered after all. Forever, every broken thing inside me, beauty makes the trade. The world, the rolling and revealing every low disguise, and I am known and living in the knowledge of a man alive.
All right, so everything that you're hearing there is all sculpted from my two bus, from my mix bus, okay? I was bypassing it in and out here in Pro Tools. If you just highlight the track by clicking down here and then you hold Shift and press A, it will bypass everything that you have on the channel. So I was doing that a little bit, but let's go ahead and let's take a peek now as to what I am running, and more importantly, why I am running them, okay? So the first thing up here for me, which has not changed since last year, is I'm just using the Slate virtual mix rack, and I have the Slate VCC in here. I use the MixBuss version of this. Obviously, there's two down here. You got the channel and the MixBuss. So this is the only MixBuss that I use in the entire session. So it's just to add a little bit of that sort of analog glue, some of those analog intangibles. It adds a little bottom for me, and it gives it a little bit of shine on top. So I like the way that it sounds, and I'm just continuing using it. Now, here's something that has changed since last year. I have changed the tape machine that I'm using specifically. I was using the Slate virtual tape machine, and this is not about what plugins are best and worst. I love the Slate tape machine. I love most plugins, okay? So I just kind of morphed into using the Ampex. The most important thing here is that it's going to a 1/2 inch tape, okay? So I have it set up as such. Calibration's at +6. Right here I'm using the 456 tape type, but I also like the GP9. It's at 15 IPS or inches per second. And I just have the Actually, I have the noise on here, okay? Doesn't really matter. I often run it with the noise off, but I make sure I keep the transformer on, the wow and flutter on, the auto cal on, things like that, crosstalk on. These are all important things for me. Now, what I was doing last year is I was running this last in the chain or right before my limiter. So that way I was sort of pushing all this audio into the tape machine. And my concept behind that was that it was sort of acting as a second compressor, because when you push level into the tape, you're going to get some very natural compression happening. So that was why I had it towards the end. But if you change the order of some plugins like tape, putting it first, for example, it is going to change the tonality here a little bit. So I was kind of playing around with some stuff, and now the last couple mixes I've done, I have had the tape right after the virtual console collection. So the concept for me here is it's like the signal's coming out of the desk, which is the VCC, and then it's going right into to the tape machine. Now, something else that has changed is these are the only two plugins, the VMR with the VCC, and then the tape, which I'll just leave open so you could sort of get a signal chain flow idea. These are the only two that I have on from the start, okay? So everything else here is either going to be bypassed or, are going to have empty slots. Now, this is very specifically done because it doesn't really matter level that I push into the console collection or into the tape, because these are inherent gluing sounds that I want regardless of whatever. What's changed a little bit is that I used to just throw up a compressor and leave it on and then say, okay, we're going to pull the faders up and we're going to push all this level into specifically one compressor. And for me, the compressor was either typically an SSL G-Bus compressor or an API 2500, both from UAD. And I sort of have shied away from that method a little bit because I want to be able to hear what all of the audio sounds like before it goes through all of this stuff. I don't just put things on there for the sake of putting them on there. Every single plugin that I've chosen is very specific and has a place and a purpose, and there's a reason behind it. So essentially, I'll just leave these two on, but we'll get them out of here now. And then the next thing that I will do is this is big, and this is one of the major concepts that has changed for me. Is I really think about what compressor I want to use. Now, in the past year, I've gotten really into sort of trying to study a little bit as to how Michael Brower mixes. Now, look, the guy is an absolute genius. He's mixed some of my favorite records, and I just love his sound, and I love the way that he works. Now, going, a little further down the rabbit hole, doing some research. I'm not going to get into the Browerizing method here. I might do a different video on that, but if you Google something like Browerize or Browerize the Mix or Michael Brower compressors, what he does is he has basically 4 mix buses that he runs signal out through. And he'll send various audio sources to different compressors based upon what tonality he wants to impart onto that audio. Now stop and think about that for a moment, right? So here's the deal, right? All compressors are gonna act like compressors. They're all gonna give you a ceiling and a noise floor, and they're all gonna squeeze the audio, right? They're all gonna do their job. But the way that I like to approach it now is I will pick a compressor specifically for the song, specifically based on the tonality of the compressor and the characteristics of the compressor. So what does that mean? Well, here I've chosen to go with the API 2500, and for me, I find that I use this the most on all my mixes just because it is such a versatile sounding compressor and you can get a lot of different sounds out of it. But the last song that I just mixed for Learning to Mix last month, I wound up using a Manly Vari-Mu style compressor on there because it was a slower song. And it was sort of a thick, like a syrupy, kind of milkshakey type of thing, okay? It wasn't a pop tune. It wasn't a hard rock song. So, I find Vari-Mu compressors have their own set of characteristics. They behave their own certain way, as does a VCA style compressor, like the API 2500 or a VCA like the SSL. I typically don't use FET style compressors on my 2-bus or optical style compressors. I find that they're just better suited for other things, okay? So really for me, it depends on, okay, like let's say I'm going to use the API here, which which I have done. So we'll bring this in now. We'll take a listen. Of course, you're going to hear it, but I'll explain sort of what I've dialed in, and why I do that.
Oh, familiar feel, my long companion through the fall. Winter's end is here, and I've been remembered after all. For every broken thing inside.
Okay, so the way that I have this set up is I really want to bring out a little bit of sustain. I want to add some fatness and some punch to this particular mix. So that's why I've gone with the API 2500 here. Now I'm doing a 10 millisecond attack, a 2-to-1 ratio, 100 millisecond release. And over here I've chose to go with a medium knee, normal on the detector thrust, and then a feedback type of compression, not feed forward, but feedback, where it's a little bit more, your compressor is going to react a little bit more based on peak level versus average RMS level. So that's going to give me a totally different sound than if I had this set to hard, loud, and new. It would behave like an entirely different beast. Let's just say I thought that the Manley Varimu was the right thing for this. So if I went and I opened it, there would be a reason that I would grab it if I can find it. Here we go. But the way that you would dial in your sound is completely different on here. So I'll show you what I would do. I would probably flick the recovery to fast. The attack and release time on a Varimu, especially on the Manley, is typically a little bit slower than most. So I'd want the attack to be somewhere between slow and medium. And then I'm just going to tweak my threshold here.
Oh, familiar feel, my long companion through the fall. Winter's end is here, and I've been remembered after all.
So for me, this is just a little bit too slow and syrupy as to why I wouldn't use it here. Again, I mean, yeah, you could use an SSL on here. If we grab the G-Bus, which I think is an extremely versatile compressor, and we do something like 10 on the attack, 100 on the release, 2-to-1, bring the makeup gain down a little bit because it come a little hot.
Oh, familiar feel, my long companion through the fall. Winter's end is here.
Now this would be fine to use on here, but I just find that the SSL is a little bit snappy for this. It just has its own sound. Another compressor I might reach for on the 2-bus would be something like a Neve 33609, but with the Neve, it sort of has its own set of limitations where it has a fixed attack time of 3 milliseconds. So that's a little bit fast for me. Not unusable by any means, but my point is this. I don't just throw up a compressor anymore because it's an API 2500 or because it's an SSL, excuse me. I choose the compressor based upon the song and the tonality that the compressor is going to impart on the way that the mix sounds, okay? So I'm using the compressor as sort of a tone shaping device in addition to, using it for its normal compression characteristics. Now for me, those are kind of like the two main changes, but they've been a big help. Some other things that I have here, we're going to go into a little bit of sweetening now, okay? So the next thing that I have here is the Slate Virtual Bus Collection Rack. I always get these VBCs and VVVC, whatever is mixed up, FG this and that. But it sounds great, and I use this as a color box for me. I'm just passing audio through the gray and the red. I don't have the ratios engaged or the thresholds engaged, so I'm just passing audio through it to give it a little bit of that analog sweetness, because they go through great lengths to model the tubes and the transformers in here. So for me, it just adds a little something nice. Now, after I do that, I like to do a little bit of, house cleaning, if you will, a little bit of cleanup work. And for me, there's no better EQ than the Brainworks Digital V3. You can do just about everything with this. I like to EQ on my MixBuss in mid-side. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm EQing in mid-side. We've got our mid or our mono section over here, stereo sections to the right. You've got different windows down here to let you do that. There's so many features on this plugin. It's great. The mono maker is wonderful. So everything below whatever you set this to is going to be summed to mono. So here I just have it set to 100, doing a little bit of filtering, taking out a little bit of low mids, little 290, little 475. And here I'm able to actually filter the sides in a little bit more because there's less low-end information out wide. If you got the kick and the bass and the vocals coming up the middle in mono, you're going to be able to take in some of the low end on the sides, and it's going to give you a little bit more headroom down the line. So for these reasons, this is why I use the Brainworks BX Digital V3. Now, after we subtract some stuff, I like to sort of add a little bit of EQ in here, a little bit of sweetening, and a staple for me has always been the Pultec EQP1A, in particular the UAD version, the newer one, and the reason being is that just by passing audio through it, it is going to sound better or sweeter or whatever buzzword you want to sort of insert in there. But what I like about the Pultec is it allows us to sort of get a little bit of that smiley face EQ, so we can boost a little bit of low end over here on the left. We can boost a little bit of high end over here on the right. But right now I'm just using it to boost some 20 hertz. So I'm boosting and cutting 20 at the same time, which is, if you want to call it the Pultec trick or whatever, it will tighten and fatten up the bottom end in a very unique, special way.
Oh, familiar feel, my long companion through the fall. Winter's end is here, and I've been remembered after all, forever.
So that just sounds really good. I love what it does. And then the last bit of EQ that I'm doing here is I'm using the amazing Kush, UBK Kush, Clariphonic. It's a parallel EQ, and essentially what you can do is you can boost the mids, high mids, and the high end here, okay? So the clarity knob over here is going to pretty much focus on the high end, and then the focus over here is going to be your upper mids and stuff like that. It can be very subtle and it can be very extreme, but nonetheless, I find it to be really an exceptional tool. There's lots of different settings on here, and it's just something that I like to use to sort of add some shine and to make my mixes sound a little bit more expensive. So check it out. If we bypass the VBC rack, the BX Digital V3, the EQP1A, and the Clariphonic, I'll pull them in. You could sort of hear what all these boxes are doing after our tape and our compressor.
Oh, familiar feel, my long companion through the fall. Winter's end is here, and I've been remembered after all. For every broken thing inside me, beauty makes the trade. And with the word, the rolling and revealing every low disguise, and I am known and living in the knowledge of a man.
So pretty big difference for me. Between those four plugins is where we sort of make the overall tone of the mix sound a little bit more expensive. Last up here, I've got my trusty old Sonics Oxford limiter, which has been with me for a long time, and I like using the Oxford limiter for a couple different reasons. Number one, it sounds very transparent, which is important to me when I limit. The other thing is that's big is we have this enhanced fader in here, and it sort of acts like a harmonic exciter or something like that. If you've ever used the Oxford inflator or the Sonics inflator, it's very similar to that. I'll push the fader up here. You'll be able to hear what that does.
Oh, familiar feel, my long companion through the fall. Winter's end is here, and I've been remembered after all. For every broken thing inside me, beauty makes the trade.
So, yeah, just nice to be able to have that. I probably would never push this to 50%, but typically something I might do is automate it on and off during a chorus, maybe bring it up to about 15%. It just sort of boosts it in a really nice way. So now that you kind of know everything that I'm using on here, let's go ahead. I will bypass everything in and out at the same time so you can sort of hear what everything does one after the other.
I've been up all night trying to give myself some sleep in a house on fire. Yahweh running after me with a word, the rolling and revealing every low disguise, and I have known and living in the knowledge of the man, the light.
Let's go back to the second verse real quick. I will bring this all in and out again. All I'm hitting is Shift and A. Just make sure the track is highlighted.
Oh, familiar feel, my long companion through the fall. Winter's end is here, and I've been remembered after all. Forever, every broken thing inside me, beauty makes the trade. And with a word, the rolling and revealing every low disguise, and I have known.
So pretty big difference, right? I think it makes, quite a large, I don't want to say 50% better, but it's a lot better for me. I like to kind of figure out what I'm going to use before I start putting other stuff on my other tracks. And, like I said, I used to just throw up a compressor and say, okay, we're going to send level into it. But now, before I do that, I turn everything off. And then really, I just sort of think, okay, what does this song call for? What compressor is going to serve the needs of this mix the best? And then I sort of work forward from there. I mean, look, sometimes, it might be a different EQ than the BX Digital V3. Sometimes I might not use the Clariphonic. Sometimes it might not need a Pultec. But these are things that I will typically use and typically reach for. Like I said, the song that I mixed last month for learning to mix my MixBuss chain was the ATR 102. And then I went into the Manley Varimu. It was a Pultec, and then it was the Oxford limiter. So I didn't even use any of the nuanced stuff where I had to carve some stuff away. So it literally is sort of a little bit of a game of checkers or chess or whatever, where things are kind of coming in and out. But just make sure that if you put something on your tube bus, that it gets you to where you want to be tonally. You hear the sound in your head that you want to hear, and don't just put things up there, for the sake of putting plugins on your tube bus. Make sure everything serves a purpose, and make sure it is with specific intent. All right, guys, so that's it for me. Again, my name is Pete with MixBetterNow.com and LearningToMix.com. As always, guys, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. If you guys enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share. Make sure you hit that little bell notification next to the subscribe button so you stay in the loop as to all of the new content that I throw up. As always, I hope you have an awesome day, and I will catch you next time. Take care.
What's up? This is Steven Slate, and you are watching Mix Better Now.